ESPN has compiled a list of the top 100 players in college football. Some guys on the Alabama team are on that list, and we're going to see what you guys think about where the placement is, including Hollywood. Where would you rank him after one season of college football? All that right here on Cover Crimson, brought to you by mybookie.ag. Let's go. All right, that's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. Great to talk to you guys today on the channel. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. Thanks for being here. I know it's a quiet time for college football, the calm before the storm. No, it's really not. We're not going to have much of a storm, although recruiting is going to heat up. But Clint, good to see you, man. And ESPN did us a favor by making a top 100 list and some familiar names on there.
Yeah, it's for the 2024 season. Like, it's not a projection for next year. It's just wrapping up who finished amongst the top 100 players. Ohio State led the way by, I think, a pretty wide margin, which isn't surprising. They won the national championship, but they had 10 players. And guys like Quinshon Judkins did not make it. Cody Simon, the linebacker, he didn't make it. There have been some other big-name players around college football, like Will Johnson, who's considered one of the best cornerbacks in college football. He didn't end up getting included on it, even though they claim the reason that he didn't was because of the injury. Maybe that hurt his production, and that's why, because like Seth McLaughlin, the former Alabama center, he did make it on there, and we'll talk about him. But
they love him on that list. Caleb Downs, they love him too.
They love a lot. Yeah, I mean, and we'll go ahead and we'll start with the guys who transferred out, who ended up being ranked. And there was 3 of them, 3 Alabama players current from the 2024 season, and then 3 transfers. Caleb Downs ranked number 18. So he was the top ranked safety, the 3rd defensive back. I think there was 2 corners ahead of him. Seth McLaughlin ranked number 82. He was the highest ranked center and the 8th offensive lineman on the list. And then Ja'Cory Brooks at Louisville checked in at number 96. He was the 15th receiver, 15th best receiver, had a 1,000-yard season for the Cardinals. So that was the 3 that transferred out that ended up on this list. Granted, Parker Brailsford, Seth McLaughlin. Like, I'm totally fine with how that worked out. Completely
trade for
fine.
us. We got clean snaps, but apparently he did it. He clean snapped it in Ohio State, in Columbia. Ohio State.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Parker Brailsford's also going to be back next year.
Yeah.
So it's like you trade multi-year.
Plus, he didn't get hurt.
Yeah, Ja'Cory Brooks is one of those. It's like they kind of needed size. Ja'Cory brings some of that. He's kind of that X style of receiver. Obviously developed and had a very productive season for Louisville this year. A lot of fans will question, hey, what could he have done with Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams in this offense? I don't know if it would have made much of a difference with how they played. I mean, he would have contributed and he would have helped. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, would he have been a 1,000-yard receiver in Tuscaloosa? Highly doubt it.
Were you surprised by that? We kept waiting on him to be a star, and he just never was.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised that he was one of those guys where it's like you knew the talent was there.
Right.
I think because he started getting involved, and like Nick Saban had a lot of praise for him. He was a 5-star freshman. He put his head down. He went to work on special teams. He earned his way on the field. Everybody could compare that to Ajayi Hall, who reportedly behind the scenes was complaining about his role and wanted more. Like, everybody just thought Ja'Cory Brooks had the right stuff. I mean, and he did. But I think from that, everybody thought, okay, contributes as a freshman a little bit, earns his way on the field, 5-star player. I think the 2nd-ranked wide receiver in that class. He's going to only continue to go up from here. And he never really did. He became a bigger contributor. He was kind of a guy at times where like they really relied on him on 3rd downs, but just never really became, or lived up to that 5-star hype or that 5-star status. And this year he certainly wouldn't have been wide receiver 1. That was going to be Ryan Williams. I say wide receiver 1 from a production standpoint and a target standpoint. But you had Jeremy Bernard, who was kind of we knew he was going to be super involved and in that conversation to be the top receiver because he was a good player. He was projected to be Washington's top receiver. He had familiarity with Kalen DeBoer. So we don't know where Ja'Cory would have fit into the equation.
Right.
But it would have been interesting. And I definitely think he would have brought something to the offense that was probably lacking. But for 2025, I think that element's more important because Kendrick Law was a super important piece this year because of his blocking ability and just how much they were running the football, especially with the quarterback getting out on the perimeter. So, it's great for him. That's kind of, you want to see those types of guys go and have success elsewhere because he just couldn't find his footing in Tuscaloosa.
Somebody's going to ask, though, in the comment section, I know that they're going to say, well, is it because Milroe couldn't throw him the ball?
I don't think that's why he transferred. I think,
why he didn't have the success. I mean, he had the catch in the Iron Bowl, which will go down as one of the great catches in Iron Bowl history in the Bryce Young game. But I mean, we just kept expecting him to be a great wide receiver, and he never was. And then he goes to Louisville, and look at him.
Sometimes a change of scenery does a guy wonders, and I don't know what that is. Is it a development thing? I think with the wide receivers, you can look at a lot of them.
Yeah.
And prior to Jamarcus Shepard, there was a wide receiver development problem. There was
bad defenses too, Clint. I mean, they're not playing anybody on defense in the ACC. I mean,
that is a great point. But so it was an easier route to more production. He was, I forget the guy's name. Caldwell. It was Cadell. He was a guy that was gonna be something Lacey. He was gonna be a major part of their offense, and he just fell well short of expectations. I think he got injured.
Mm-hmm.
Corey Brooks was supposed to be in that equation as well, but he kind of became the guy whenever that happened. So it's like, it's like I said, I don't know what it is, man, but some guys, they go somewhere else. It's a fresh start, and they seem to find it, and you never know what is the reasoning behind that. Obviously, it's a disappointment to fans, but I think the biggest one on the list is Caleb Downs, number 18.
Well, that's the one that irritates me the most because when I get on the NIL rants, you can't lose those players. You just can't. You can't lose those guys and win championships.
Well, what I will say is his mind, and I say his mind. I don't know if it was his mind or agent's mind or parents' mind, but it was made up. He gave Alabama a chance to see who they were going to go out and get as far as a head coach. But then that head coach has got to figure out, okay, who's going to be my defensive coordinator? And just Caleb Downs at that point, the one reason everybody wants to say, oh, these guys come to Alabama because they love Alabama. That's not the case for everybody. In fact, nowadays, that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Nick Saban was the reason he was at Alabama, and losing that advantage, especially with him kind of not seeing it coming. I think that was pretty devastating for him. I'm not trying to take up for the guy. I'm not trying to, I know fans are going to feel how they're going to feel. And to some extent, I feel the same way. But I also understand it was a difficult situation. And so he has been an absolute superstar for Ohio State. He'll continue to be next year. He's only a sophomore. He was only a sophomore. So it's like, man, just imagining him, whether it be playing, one of those two safety spots, whether it be playing the Husky position, I think he would have some versatility. Would probably be playing safety if I'm speaking candidly, but I think he could have had a lot of success in this vision-oriented defense, but it's tough to argue that, from a production standpoint, maybe not to the extent that you would think for a guy of his caliber. But when you talk to NFL people and stuff, it's like he put his talent plenty on display, is going to be a top 10 pick. So, you hate that for Alabama. We knew when you lost Nick Saban, the day he decided to hang it up, I thought there would be more Caleb Downs. I really did. Now, granted, I say more like he grows on trees. I'm saying like your star players, your big time players, your Tyler Bookers, Jahad Campbell's, all of that stuff where it's like everybody would have been bailing. And so you lose. I mean, just losing Caleb Downs, and I'd say just losing. Obviously, you lost some other guys too, but of the players, it's like, man, just makes you sick to your stomach that guy left.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any other player that them leaving just absolutely makes you sick to your stomach?
Yeah. Well, you knew that was going to be a bad loss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You knew it up front. There was no, and I think the coaching staff did as good of a job as you could have possibly have asked them to as far as replacing him. And I understand Keon Sabb. No one is saying he's Caleb Downs or anything close, but just filling that void with one of the better safeties in last year's portal cycle.
Yeah.
And him actually coming in, he did get hurt. I do understand there was some inconsistency as far as the tackling, like, would be trying to, hit guys a little bit high. It wasn't working out for him, but he also did some really, really good things. And I think he's got a bright future in Tuscaloosa. So, that's about as good as you could have asked because he's also a multi-year guy. He wasn't a 1 year stopgap, fill a void type of player. So, once again, Alabama obviously didn't get the better end of that deal, but they did a really good job of kind of overcoming what should have been a much more impactful loss. It was still a huge loss, but it could have been a lot worse.
Well, if you kept those guys, maybe you could have spent your money on some guys that could have helped you somewhere else too.
Yeah, and Caleb Downs was going to be demanding quite a pretty penny.
Yeah.
I think they actually saved money.
Quite a bit of
Keon Sabb replacing Caleb Downs with Keon Sabb, I think saved some money. So I think in some ways they were able to go out and get a little bit more. But seeing him there at 18, that's, it is what it is.
Well, his ability to stop the run and get to the edges. I mean, that's.
Oh, I mean, just his instincts and feel for the game.
Yeah.
He's a coach on the field already. He's a sophomore, but Alabama.
So is he eligible for the draft?
No.
Okay, so he's coming back another year.
Oh yeah, 100%. He's a true sophomore. So that's, I think, for Bama fans, that's what hurt the worst with him leaving. Is it's like, man, Ohio State's not just getting a superstar. They're getting a multi-year superstar. And, and you just knew that the growing pains that he went through as a freshman, even though he was so advanced as a freshman, it's like, man, he did all that in Tuscaloosa. And now he's going to get to go to Columbus, or Columbus is going to have him, or Ohio State is going to have him come in being a much more polished, complete defensive back who kind of has knocked all those wrinkles out of his game, and he's going to be an impact player. And that's exactly what he was. I mean, I'm not going to try to downplay what he was able to achieve, just because I'm not happy that he's not in Tuscaloosa. But Alabama did land 3 of their own on here, and I want to talk about those guys. Ryan Williams checked in at number 71. He was the 8th ranked receiver. Jahad Campbell checked in at number 48. He was LB4. And then Tyler Booker checked in 1 spot ahead of him at 47, and he was the 2nd ranked interior offensive lineman and the 5th ranked offensive lineman. So if you include tackles, guards, and centers, he was OL5. So no one, I mean, number 47 is the highest that you've got. Mick, are you a little shocked by that, or based off of results, are you kind of not shocked by it?
Well, the thing that sticks out to me first is we only have 1 guy on the list for next year. And I'm going to guess with Nick Saban as head coach, there were probably years where we had multiple guys on this list because we had so many underclassmen that were really good players, right? Which we would have had Caleb Downs had he not transferred, and then Ryan Williams. But what's weird to me is I think Tyler Booker is underrated on here. He's going to be a superstar in the NFL, just like he was in college. But it's like umpiring, when you do a great job at the offensive line spot, no one knows, right? And then what the other thing is that Mel Kiper did a draft, and he's got Booker and Campbell going right next to each other in the draft, right? And it's funny that on this list they're right next to each other. So I don't know why, but it seems like wherever one is, you find the other one right behind them.
Offense, defense, right? But getting both sides of football covered. And yesterday I talked about Nakai Hill-Green with EG. And just, what I think he's going to replace in Alabama's defense with the run stopping ability and the consistency with his run fits and just the feel that he has for the game. I mean, Jahad Campbell is still an ascending player. Like, his tools that he has to work with are off the charts. And as he got more comfortable playing off-ball linebacker, he continued to grow, and you saw that growth on the field. He was certainly an impact player, and the versatility to kind of be a Swiss Army knife in some ways what was really beneficial for Alabama's defense. So me complimenting Hill-Green or talking about something that he's going to provide the defense that I think was lacking this year with Campbell and Lawson, that's not me knocking Campbell and Lawson, because both of those guys, especially Campbell, he brought elements to the defense that Hill Green's not going to. So you'll have to kind of compensate for that a little bit. But, one of the biggest problems with Alabama's defense was their inconsistency stopping the run. And that is something, Hill Green is also a very serviceable cover player. Like, he's not like a two-down thumper. I thought he got a lot better over the course of the last, of last season doing that. But his kind of bread and butter is the communication, the football IQ, and the run stopping, the run fits. He's normally, when you watch him on tape, it's pretty evident that he's doing the right thing at the right time a lot of the time. So, that's something that he's going to bring to the defense. But Campbell being ranked in the top 50 is not surprising at all. Booker, I agree with you. I mean, to me, he should probably be higher. Is there anybody that, because you got to understand, it's like I said, guys like Will Johnson didn't make the list. Guys like Quinshon Judkins, who everybody felt like was one of the better running backs, and there were a lot of running backs on this list. So, including Dylan Sampson for Tennessee, you checked in at number 16. Jacquez Hunter for Auburn was at number 95. I mean, there were a bunch of running backs, and Travion Henderson was one of them. I want to say maybe 70s or 80s for him. I don't feel like going to find him, but Quinshon Judkins didn't. So there's some of the, and those are just the guys off the top of my head. Like, there's going to be a bunch of players. I mean, this is the top 100 players in all of college football. That's why it's kind of crazy how one team had 10% in Ohio State. It's not surprising.
Well, they went out and bought those guys. So.
They did a lot of them. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
And I've said this before.
Development too.
If we want to compete, we're going to have to spend the money. And $30 million when you make $1 billion is not that much money. And then people are like, "Well, you're not allowed to do that." Listen, man, come on. Come on.
Yeah.
That's like it. That when there's a will, there's a way, and it's not like anybody's going to come down and put the NCAA's they're like a toothless dog, man. They're not going to do anything about it. But Ohio State bought that championship because they went out and bought the best players. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they're all over this list. And then they won it.
People's got to understand they bought a lot of the players. They also bought their own players.
Yeah.
Like, they took care of their own guys too. They spent money. So it's like a guy doesn't have to enter the transfer portal for him to cost you money. And I think people don't understand that.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
When a guy's a 3-star player, let's say, who's somebody that's kind of lower rated. I don't know. Let's say Michael DeBose comes in as a true freshman. He's kind of a 4-star player, ranked kind of, I want to say right outside the top 200, somewhere between 180 and 250. I don't know exactly where he's finished up, but let's say he comes in. I guarantee he was NIL money is, it's respectable, I'm sure, but I don't think it's anything to write home about. If he comes in and he immediately assumes a starting role, he earns it, he becomes a star player, whether it be at guard or tackle, I guarantee you next offseason, Bama's going to have to take care of him more. That's how it is. So that money is not just spent on acquiring guys, but look at Jeremiah Smith, who was, I think, number 5 on this list as a true freshman, which is crazy, but warranted. I'm not arguing that. But he cost them a lot of money. Like, there was belief right before he signed on the dotted line. I don't remember if it was Florida. It might have been Florida State or Oregon. I think it was Florida State. But it was like, oh, is he going to flip? And everybody was concerned about it. And then, I think Ohio State upped the NIL offer, and he stuck with Ohio State. So that's money you spent, a lot of money. Yeah. Will Howard, the quarterback, that is money that you had to go out and spend. Julian Sayin, who's projected to be their starter next year, he added to the quarterback depth in that room. I'm sure did some scout team stuff.
Remember when he was at Bama?
Yeah, and he was doing I'm sure him doing the scout team things that he was doing contributed to that defense being better. But like Jack Sawyer was homegrown, but they had to pay him. Caleb Downs was a guy they had to spend a lot of money on. So it was kind of like both.
Oh, him from Georgia, right out of off of Georgia's campus.
Yeah, well, yeah. And what I will say is that, a lot of people that I've made mention of this, and people have kind of pushed back on it. There are good players in the transfer portal, really good players. And quarterback is one of those where it's like guys are looking to get paid. They're going to enter the transfer portal, like that Mateer guy that's now went to Oklahoma from Washington State. It's like that guy's going to enter. Carson Beck's going to enter. Quinn Ewers should have entered the transfer portal, not the NFL draft.
Yeah.
But so that's always going to be, those guys are always going to be available. I say that, like, there's going to be a handful of elite quarterbacks, pretty elite, that are going to be in the transfer portal, but like left tackle and, some of these like key positions, it's like, it's limited. But I think what Alabama did as far as taking care of its own guys, and while the rankings, trust the development process. Understand that Kalen DeBoer, what made him special at every other stop is he didn't have the talent that other people had, but he had the ability to develop that talent. And he did that at Washington. He turned, Rome Odunze, go look up his recruiting rankings. There was nothing to write home about. Some of these guys were like 3-star players, and he's turning them into NFL talents. Understand that he's going to go out and do his own evaluations. He's not going to do it based off of what anybody else thinks. It's the same way that Nick Saban approached it. And so he went and got guys that he felt like could fill needs and could be really good players for Alabama. Let's see how that turns out. Some of them might pan out and become superstars. Some of them might just be solid contributors. Others might, fall by the wayside, and it didn't really hit. But what we do know is that in the transfer portal, at Washington, they weren't getting any, really highly regarded transfer portal guys, but they were getting super big impacts from transfer portal players. So just trust the process, man. I think Alabama is going to be just fine on that front. And I think they're building the roster the right way, taking care of their own guys.
I just worry though that you lose those mid-level guys, in the transfer portal, the guys that you spend time developing. And then it's like you're missing that underbelly of guys that come in that second wave, and that's what worries me. I mean, it's hard to develop when, the guys that are ready to be your first backups and eventually your starters are going to go to places like South Carolina.
Justin Okoronkwo. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's the exact guy I thought of when you brought that up. I think he's the guy that most people would think of, but that is a problem because that development, in some situations, you're developing somebody for somebody else.
That's right.
And so, granted, Okoronkwo, the reason that he was rated so low, a 3-star player, was because he had very little football experience, American football experience. And, but everybody knew from like a height, weight, speed, prototypical player, and just the way that he had picked up the game. It's like, if he continues on this trajectory, he's going to be really good. So like, I'm not saying he wasn't sought after, but it's like in some of these cases, it's like, hey, no one, imagine Josh Jacobs in a transfer portal era. And yeah. I'm not saying he would have left Alabama, but what I am saying is like, no one gave him the time of day coming out of high school. Alabama saw he fit what they were looking for at the running back position. They do recruit him. They go and they get him. And then if he would have like developed and had the freshman season that he did, but then he's got all these other guys ahead of him, if it had been a transfer portal world, that development and you spotting that talent and putting it on the radar for everybody else, that could have just turned out to benefit someone else. Yeah. So that's something that you got to keep an eye on. It's a new world out there, but at the same time, that also can work into your favor.
Yeah, that's definitely it. Well, I love these lists. They don't really mean anything, but I think they are significant just because the team with the most talent wins. And I picked Ohio State from day one to win the national championship because to me, they had a clear talent advantage, and eventually it paid off. But it took a while to get there, right? It wasn't like they had a dominant season. They were really good, but then when the playoffs came, they kicked it in another gear. And maybe also part of that is when you get to the end, the team that's deepest can run. And that was always one of Nick Saban's secret weapons, is that you always had really good players on the second and third team. I don't know that we're there anymore. Alabama.
I think they had stopped being there prior to Nick Saban leaving, though.
You're saying it started to kind of melt away.
We saw it in 2021. You lose Jameson Williams and John Mechie, and your wide receiver room fell apart. You couldn't rely on them. And you were stacked with talent. So at the time that was happening,
Hall.
Yeah, nobody thought that. And Ja'Cory Brooks,
catch the ball side, his hands like this after complaining,
and then complaining about roll. It's funny how that works. But Mick, and you might not have any that immediately come to mind, but is there anybody for next year that's not on this list currently that you would go ahead and predict will be on this list? Like Ron Williams, I think we're both predicting. Not only is he going to be on it, he's going to be a lot higher. He feels like he's going to eventually be like a top 20 player in college football. But is there anybody else? Like Parker Brailsford, to me, I almost feel like I understand other people aren't as high on him as I am. I understand that the size limitations, they present some challenges at times, even though it's not the challenges you would think with how small he is.
Right.
But, he would be the one that for this year, I'd probably say I wouldn't say he got snubbed, but I think him and McLaughlin are in very similar conversations to me as far as the type of season that they had. It's just Ohio State was more consistent with their run game. And Ohio State, went to the national championship, and this is fresh on everybody's mind. So Is there anybody else for you that stands out?
Man, that's a good question. And I was going to say Brailsford. Maybe Keon Sabb if he has a good year. I mean, he's got the talent to definitely be there, and the name recognition. I think that's part of it too. And
Yeah.
Jeremy Bernard, I mean, he could have that type of year. I mean, we saw flashes of that. And then Jam Miller, Jam Miller, like they finally started giving him the ball in the Auburn game, and we saw that he can do it. He can catch, he can run. The offensive line's got to be more consistent with the blocking, but I like the way that he was improving on that. And then with Justice Haynes gone, I mean, he's going to be the guy that gets most of the carries, right? If he stays healthy and doesn't turn the ball over. So, I'm thinking that those guys stand out to me immediately. Maybe if Jaden Roberts stays healthy, like I don't feel like we really had the true Roberts experience. Like it just felt like listening to Mike, breaking it down that the guy was playing hurt for a large part of the season. And he's a tough guy. Obviously he was out there, but you're not your best when you're injured. Right. So maybe you could throw him in that mix too. Just off the top of my head though.
I would say for me, because I think you hit on a lot of great ones. I think Keon Sabb or Bray Hubbard. But
Bray.
Both of them maybe not. But Bray feels like a guy that kind of is like gonna. I don't know that for being where he was at coming out of high school, kind of how he was viewed going into this season, like with all the transfers they added, like where was Bray Hubbard going to fit into the mix? I mean, that guy, I'm telling you, he's a really, really good player. But to me, the number one guy, as far like LT Overton's another one, by the way. That guy can just learn to finish. I almost feel like he would have been on the list this year. But people that aren't on it, that I feel like could be on it next year, probably my favorite is James Smith. I don't know. I feel like the opportunity is now there where they're turning to him. He's going to get, the starter respect, the starter opportunity as far as, the attention and all that stuff, as far as development and making sure that he's coming along and all that. And just, I mean, what I saw against Michigan, if he can do that next year, I feel like he is a very safe bet to be on this list. I am so incredibly, and maybe we're getting into next year and it's like, I mean, what was Clint thinking? That wouldn't be the first time that's happened, but to me, James Smith would probably be the number one. Damani Jackson or Zabian Brown. Damani Jackson probably feels like the safer bet, even though Zabian, I really like him. Would you put Caden Proctor up there? Probably not. But there's a premium for tackles, and if he starts emerging and continues to develop, and he's getting this recognition as one of the better tackles in college football next year, it is possible. But I mean, how do you feel about Caden?
You know what? I mean, he's one of those guys that you look at and you're like, he's got all the tools, and I think that matters, right? Big guy, they've talked about him being what they described him as like Kobe Bryant. So, so we'll see.
Yeah.
If he was, that'd be great for the team.
Oh, well, yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, I think you got to get continued improvement from him. That's going to be big. Now, what does that improvement lead to? Does it lead to being one of the top 100 players in college football? I can't tell you. But I think he's going to be good next year. I think he was good this year. I don't think he was great, but he went from being pretty darn bad last year to pretty darn good this year. And I'm hoping that he just keeps on getting better because he's fully capable.
Yeah.
The other big dark horse for me, because James Smith is one where it's like I don't think a lot of people is going to be talking about him, not enough. So it's like, okay, you say his name and people's ears perk up. But to me, the one that's kind of I can't go this far because it's such a massive leap. But I was watching Jalen Hill, not only high school highlights, but I was watching what he did in 2023 for Alabama. And you've got Isaiah Horton, and I think Horton's going to be working ahead of him. And I love Horton. I mean, I think he's going to add to this room. But I just started thinking, man, and maybe it takes him longer. Like it takes him a year to kind of get his footing back or whatever. But before it's all said and done, assuming that the injury that he had is not going to permanently impact his play and he can return to what he was prior to the injury.
Yeah.
Especially in this Kalen DeBoer offense that rewards guys who can win vertically with speed, but also the 50-50 go up and win the contested catches. Like Jalen Hill's not overly big, but man, If I had the biggest dark horse out of nowhere, no one else would call it pick for to be in the top 100 players next year, for college football from Alabama. My absolute dart, my prayer, throwing it up, Hail Mary would be Jalen Hill. And we'll see how that turns out. I mean, it's possible he doesn't even end up being the starter. But, I just don't want fans to forget about him.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Very good point. You forget because he was injured all year. But he's got the speed and very athletic, and it'll be exciting to have him back. And with a quarterback that I think is going to be better at throwing the football.
I think it's going to make a huge difference. I think Ryan Williams would have been higher. And this, I know we say this stuff, and it's like, why are you all the time knocking on Jalen Milroe? Well, he was a really good quarterback. But, I mean, no one is questioning that his strength lied with his legs and the volume in which he can handle in your run game. And that's just, it wasn't him as a passer. I mean, there was limitations there. Sometimes I think the limitations were over exaggerated, but I just think no one they're going to put on the field next year is going to bring Jalen Milroe's legs. But there are elements, kind of like what I was talking about with the linebackers with Jahad Campbell and Hill Green, where it's like there's elements that whoever ends up starting at quarterback is going to bring to the table that Jalen Milroe just simply didn't. And I think guys like Ryan Williams is going to benefit from that. I think Jalen Hill, all the receivers, the running backs out of the backfield, the tight ends, everybody.
It'll fit DeBoer's offense better, too.
It will.
So that's it. Anyway, that's the hope. You guys get in the comment section and tell us what you think. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. Right here to Cover Crimson. We're brought to you by mybookie.ag. Use that promo code next round to double your initial deposit. We appreciate them for putting this channel on every day. That's mybookie.ag, promo code next round. And Clint, what do you got going on right with the covercrimson.com site?
We're continuing on putting the emphasis and the focus on elements of a national championship team, or at least a team that gets to the national championship. And I've been doing a lot of research and putting that together. That's been fun. I think it's going to be informative. I've been talking about it for days. That should be coming out at some point relatively soon. I did just put together like a graphic, and we got it up on the Instagram page, which you can certainly go follow. We put it up on the Cover Crimson Twitter account, which you can also go follow at Cover Crimson. But it's just visual graphics of the roster or the depth chart. My depth chart projections only have one guy per position. Like I have a Nugwam or a Nugwam, however you say it. I have him listed as a left tackle. It's also possible he's like left tackle 2 and right tackle 2. It's possible that like Gino Vandermark's the actual backup center, but I have him competing with Cam Dewberry at left guard. So it's like only one spot per player, so it's not like exact, but they also usually don't list one guy multiple spots on the official depth chart. So I put that up over on Twitter, and it's week 1 projection. So like Deontay Lawson is listed at the stinger position behind Hill Green, and the reason for that is we don't know how healthy he's going to be, if he's even going to be available for week 1. So these are week 1 depth charts, early projections. I'm sure a lot's going to change, but put that up, and I'll continue to kind of expand on that. We've already expanded on it at covercrimson.com, but I'll continue to do that. And so we got a lot going on, man. All the basketball coverage that Christian Sykes is providing, pregame, postgame, all that stuff. We'll be back Sunday, doing another kind of recap and looking ahead as far as the basketball. It's going to be a weekly show for us. So if you haven't already, go check out this past Sundays, and then be on the lookout for another one on this Sunday.
All right. And I'm going to try to get Coker corralled for another Elephant in the Room podcast as well. So check out all of our content right here on the channel, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us, and roll tide.